The Vegas Golden Knights are now in a position where they must decide whether they want to move forward with Pete Deboer at head coach or if it's time to move on and bring someone new and someone fresh to this team. There isn't really a lot of possible competition out there in the market for coaching at this point, except for one key person that was just fired from the New York Islanders just a week or so ago now, and that is Barry Trotz. He's been an incredible coach throughout his entire tenure in the league, and I think he's still got a lot of fuel left in him, if you understand what I mean by that. I think he can still bring a lot to a team at the head coaching position, and in this video, we're going to be talking about Pete Deboer versus Barry Trotz, who could be on this team next year. Both of them, I think, could be on this team, and maybe why I personally prefer one over the other. So, if this is your first time on the channel, my name is John. This is the Sports Advocate. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is my first time sitting on this couch, so if you've been to these videos, if you've been on my channel before, there's been a lot of people telling me to sit down. I'm now seated. Tell me if you guys actually like this or not. But if you do enjoy this content, give me a like, or you can give me a dislike. Give me some criticism down below, and tell me if you would rather have Pete Deboer, Barry Trotz, or someone else at the head coaching position for the Vegas Golden Knights. And as always, if you like this content, go ahead and subscribe because I have content like this coming out daily. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and get right into this. We're going to start with Pete Deboer. He is currently the coach of the Vegas Golden Knights, and why not start with the person that's already there, the person that we know how he works with the scheme. So Pete Deboer, his stats, he's 513, 379, and 123 throughout his entire tenure in the NHL as a head coach. That's a little bit over 500. He also is 56 and 47 all-time in the playoffs. Again, just a little bit over 500. That's not incredible, but it's still good to be above 500 than below it. These coaches that have been doing it for such a long time, no matter how great of years you may have, you're always going to end up coming down to earth and being near that 500 mark just because how long you've been in the league for. Pete Deboer is 98, 50, and 12 with the Vegas Golden Knights through these past 3 years, and he's 22 and 17 in the playoffs with Vegas. He's made the conference finals his very first year with Vegas. Like I said, he's been with Vegas for 3 years. He made it the very first year to the conference finals. And then last year they made the semifinals, I want to say, and they ended up missing the playoffs this year, which is why a lot of fans and I think even some people within the team are thinking about moving on from him because they missed the playoffs with an incredibly good roster. And we'll be talking about this here in a second this year. But, excuse me. This roster was incredible, and yes, there were some things going on that caused them to go below, but even with everything that was going on, I think this team definitely should have made the playoffs, and there's a lot of variables. So let's talk about this year first. This year, with the Vegas Golden Knights, they missed the playoffs by just a couple games. They were 43, 31, and 8 as a record, so they're just barely one game above 500. So they end up doing, not terrible, but definitely not as good as expected. There was a lot of people that had them as a favorite for the Stanley Cup Finals, and they missed playoffs altogether. Now, there was a lot of injuries, and that's not really on the coaching. That does suck, but I still think with whom the team did have during these injuries, they definitely should have made the playoffs, and at the end of the year, they were quite healthy. Excuse me. Now, as a coaching aspect, I feel like there was a lot of player mismanagement, whether that's overplaying some people that maybe don't deserve it or underplaying people that are definitely deserve it, who've been playing well and they're still getting underplayed. Also been a lot of goalie distrust with Robin Lehner, Logan Thompson, and even Laurent Brossoit. Robin Lehner was getting injured. He was in and out of lineup, again with injuries. There was a time where he came back. He played for 6 games. He got injured. He was gone again. And then at the end of the year, he comes back again. And then right after he comes back at the end of the year, it was just a huge, huge thing going on. He had a really, really poor game. He had a poor stretch, for being honest. But he had a poor game. I think it was against the Devils. And then Pete Deboer decides to start him in the next game because he was saying, this is our starter. He should be able to go out and win these games in these situations. And I do agree with that. but I don't agree with the circumstances. He starts Robin Leonard after a really poor game the previous day. I think it was back-to-backs. And then Robin Leonard lets in 1 goal on 13 shots, which is a pretty good save percentage. And he gets pulled after the first period, and they put in Logan Thompson. And that's just terrible management of goalies. And not only that, but when all this was happening, Logan Thompson was on a 5-game win streak at this time. He was doing incredible. He was getting a lot of crucial saves, and he was keeping the team in it. But when Robin Leonard came back from injuries, Pete Deboer just threw him in there, even though Logan Thompson was doing really good. And I think that was a little bit of a mistake. And we ended up finding out. So the Pete Deboer pulls him after the first period, and for no real good reason. And then, like, a couple days later, we find out Robin Leonard's going to be shutting down the season because he's going to go get surgery on his shoulder again. And it was just terrible. So now you're sitting there, you're forced to have Logan Thompson. And at this point, the important games down the stretch to get yourself into playoff contention, because they were like 1 game out, even at the end of the season, they were only 1 game out. They lost these crucial games down the stretch. 3 of the last 5 games of the season went to the shootout, and Vegas Golden Knights went 0 for 17 in the shootout in 3 games, back to back. 0 for 17. And that's 100% on coaches. Yes, the players need to be able to go out and score. It's one-on-one. The coach doesn't tell them what they have to do. At least I don't believe that they do. But when you go 0-7 in your first game and you are in the shootout and you got 4 games left, you might not expect to go to the shootout again throughout those last 4 games, but you definitely have to do that a little bit in practice. If you go 0-7, you got to hit shootouts in practice because it is really important. And the very next game, you go 0-3 in a shootout again, and now you're 0-10 in 2 games, and at that point, you have to do something in practice. Be like, hey, we got to improve this shootout. Whether that's even like before the game, just working out shootouts, working out techniques, how to fake people out, and then you have a 3rd game in a row that you go to shootout, and you clearly didn't practice enough because you go 0-7 again for the second time in 3 games, and you go 0-17 in 3 games in the shootout. That to me, that's coaching. This is squeaky. To me, that's 100% coaching to go 0-17 in the shootout in 3 games in a row. And even some of these games that didn't go to the shootout down the stretch here were just terribly mismanaged in every form. And line shuffles happened all year long, but it was really, really bad towards the end of the year. I don't think Jack Eichel ever had a line that he was on. He was just getting moved around whenever. The second the team started doing bad, I feel like Jack Eichel was on a different line. And the whole team, I feel like the second the team did a little bit bad, even if it was 1 period. Like, I understand if you're down big and entering the 3rd period, you do a line shuffle. But I feel like you have like 1 bad period where it's 2-0 in the first, and Pete Deboer is just shuffling every single line. And even when things get rolling on these lines, like a line starts doing really well after he's moved them, they don't stick with it for the next game. They're like, oh yeah, this worked for this game, but it will never work again, so we're just going to go back to how it was. And I think that's mind-boggling to think about. So this year was definitely left a poor taste in a lot of our mouths, and I think was a lot of mismanagement, not only for Pete Deboer, but also the rest of the coaches in the injuries and keeping people healthy. But I think it has a lot to go on Pete Deboer. I think when you have a team that's a lot of people are saying that is going to be a Stanley Cup Finals contender, and you missed playoffs, that goes on the coach a lot. And yes, there was a lot of injuries to very important players, but a good coach should be able to coach you through that, at least give you a shot to be in the playoffs and prove how good you are, and that's not what Pete gave them this year. Now, his history in the entire NHL, as long as he's been a coach, he's made the Stanley Cup Finals twice. He lost both, but he's made them twice with the Sharks, I believe, and the Devils. He lost both of them. He's made the conference finals 4 times. Now, here's the thing. The Devils, they made the finals his very first year, and they made a little run. They did pretty good. The team was not expected to get that far, and they make a run. So good on him. But his next 2 years, right after making the Stanley Cup Finals, the next 2 years, they missed playoffs altogether with that team. That's a little worrisome. And pretty much every time he goes to a new team, his first year, they do very well. They do very, very well his first year with the team, and then they just go downhill. it is consistent. You'd see it every time that you've watched. If you go look at his stats on whatever you want to look at, I don't care if it's NHL Network, even Wikipedia, the record for his team always goes downhill after his first year. It always just goes downhill slightly. And I think there was one circumstance that his second year was actually his best with the team, but then it still went downhill. And it's worrisome when you see something consistently happen like that. Now, Pete Deboer has been a coach for 15 years. He's only missed the playoffs 6 times, so that's not terrible. I mean, it's not what you want to see. It's over 1/3 of the time you're missing the playoffs, but you've also made the conference finals 4 times and the Stanley Cup finals twice, so I feel like that kind of evens out pretty well. But he's missed the playoffs. I said that he missed the playoffs the following 2 years after the Devils made the Stanley Cup Finals run. And it's really worrisome for me to see that Pete Deboer has consistently got worse after his first year with the team, and now entering his possible 4th year with this team, and he's already missed the playoffs. If he gets worse, how much worse do you get? Are you talking like a top 10 lottery pick, like base? That's what you're going to get most likely, because how bad you do, your percentage is high. What does that mean for the team? It's just really worrisome for me. Now, the other option, he was with the New York Islanders last year, and the New York Islanders did miss the playoffs, but their roster was nothing like what Vegas had. Barry Trotz. Barry Trotz has been an incredible coach, and we're going to get into that real quick. But his overall stats, 914, 670, 60 ties, and 168 losses. He's been a coach for so long that there was still ties in the NHL. I think that tells you something about how good a coach he is, that he's been in the league that long and people have trusted him that long. I think that tells you a lot. But again, he's above 500 on his winning, and it's hard to say because 60 ties, if you do that this year, you don't know for sure that half of those would be wins, half of those would be losses, so it's kind of hard to group that in, but he's above 500 no matter how you would do those ties one way or the other. He's 83-79 all-time in the playoffs. Again, you're a little bit above 500. Both these guys, record-wise, percentage-wise, is very, very similar, but I think Barry Trotz overall is by far the better coach long-term, and I still think right now he is. 152, 102, and 34 with the Devils, which was his last team. He was with them for 4 years. That's quite a decent amount above 500. This was his first time. This last year was the first time that he missed the playoffs with this team. He had a 28-21 playoff record with the Devils. Again, you're above 500, and by a decent amount there. You have a fourth more wins, if that makes sense mathematically, than you do losses. 21-28, obviously 21 is 3/4 of 28. So you're doing quite well record-wise with this past team, and that includes 152, 102, and 34. That includes this past year where the team struggled. I think they had 36 or so wins, and you're 6. What is that? How many? There's 82, so you need 41. And if they had 36, that's 5 games below 500. So, I mean, he was below 500. They missed the playoffs. 5 games does not affect the win-loss record by a whole lot, but still he's well above 500 overall with the Devils, even after a bad season with the Devils this past year. He's also made the conference finals his second year with the Devils. In his past 4 years, he made it the second year. So that is good news that he has proven, even though he's been in the league for a long time, he's proven that he's still able to bring a team deep into the playoffs rounds. And no, it's not the Stanley Cup finals, but you're one game away, or one series away, I should say. And that's still very, very good news to hear. And like I said, he missed the playoffs for the first time in 4 years with the team, but the roster was nothing that was spectacular. They weren't even expected to make the playoffs. They don't make the playoffs, where Vegas was expected to be a finals contender, and they missed the playoffs altogether. I think Barry Trotz raised the ceiling for this team. I think Pete Deboer lowered it. If I'm being brutally honest, I think Barry Trotz, if he's not coaching this team, if anyone else is coaching this team, I think this Devils roster has 30 wins or 20-some wins and like an 8-win difference. And if you add 8 wins to, I mean, heck, listen, I'm just going to pull this up real quick. Let's go to the NHL Network. If you were to add 8 wins to the Vegas Golden Knights win-loss And you know what? Let's just make it really simple. We're not going to add 8 wins and make it like they get 16 points more, because that's a huge difference. We're just going to take the overtime losses and turn them into overtime wins, so we're only adding 8 points. Now you're sitting at 51 and 31 record, which is it's quite good if you were to ask me. I cannot see the standings on here, but you're 51 and 31. That's a very, very good record in the NHL overall. And if you add plus 8 points, and Vegas is in the Western Conference, they're in the Pacific Division, you add 8 points. Vegas ends with 102? No. 102 points. Vegas ends with 102 points, puts them above the Kings, and Vegas is automatically in the playoffs with 102 points. And it also puts them above the Stars and above the Predators. So they're guaranteed. They're not even a wild card spot if they add 8 wins and only 8 points in those 8 wins. So they're above. That's, I think Barry Trotz raised the ceiling of the Devils. I think Pete Deboer maybe lowered the ceiling for the Vegas Golden Knights. And that's good news that Barry's able to raise the ceiling, and you're looking at him for a possible replacement if you were to move on from Pete Deboer. Now, last year, we talked about it a lot here. They missed the playoffs with the Devils, but I think it was pretty clear that the roster was not incredible, and he was able to raise the ceiling, and he's proven throughout his full tenure in the league. If you don't know, tenure means a long term of time. It doesn't mean only 10 years. He's been in the league 23 years. He's worked with a lot of different types of teams, types of players, and I think that's something that can be brought to this team. Now, history. Let's talk about history of Barry Trotz, because there's some incredible history. He's won the Stanley Cup playoffs. Bad news for us Vegas fans. It was against the Vegas Golden Knights 2017-2018 year, the Vegas' inaugural season. Barry Trotz led the Capitals to a win in the Stanley Cup Finals. He was the coach of that team, so he has a Stanley Cup playoff Finals win under his belt. He's good for him. Props to him. I wish Vegas won it, but good for him. He's made the conference finals twice, so yes, Pete Deboer has made it more times in less length of time, but when Barry Trotz has been able to get his team there, he's been able to do a little bit more with like winning it all, actually, instead of everything else. Now, Pete Deboer, I do feel like he's entered on better teams. Each time Pete Deboer has entered on a team, the team was already good. They do good right away when Pete Deboer enters because the roster was already good. Now, when Barry Trotz enters, they're normally in a little bit of a rough patch. Maybe they're still barely making the playoffs, but you bring Barry on, and like his second year with the team or a couple years down the road, they improve, and it takes them a long while before they start kind of falling a little bit more. So I think Barry Trotz gets brought to teams that have worse rosters, and he improves the roster, where Pete Deboer comes to a team with a really good roster and then doesn't really do much to improve it at all. I wouldn't say he makes it worse, but I feel like he doesn't improve it enough. Barry Trotz also has missed the playoffs 9 times in 23 years. Now, I don't know what that percentage is, but it's under half, obviously. And yes, that sucks, that 9 times in 23 years, but a lot of those were his very first years in the league. I think like his first 4, his first 5 years were all missed playoffs. So that's a little bit worrisome, but if you look at how many playoffs he's missed since that stretch at the beginning of the year, or beginning of his career, it's not as worrisome as it may be otherwise. He also has the 3rd most wins as a coach all time in the NHL. So if that tells you anything about a winning coach, he has the 3rd most all time. So that's incredible news. Like I said, he has worked with many teams, many players, many systems, and he's still able to consistently win. I mean, if you're 3rd all time, you obviously are consistently winning, and he's done that in multiple different setups, so good on him. And that's kind of one reason why I think he can bring a lot to the team. So what can he do for Vegas? What can he bring to the Vegas Golden Knights? Well, he brings winning. That's pretty clear. If you're 3rd all time in wins, he brings winning to the team, and he's worked with multiple different schemes, coaches, players, systems, all this stuff, young players, old players, role players, all this stuff. He knows how to work with people and how to raise their ceilings. He's also proven that he can win, like I said, with good rosters. He's proven he can win with good rosters and make them great rosters with the Capitals, taking them all the way to the finals and winning the Stanley Cup. That Capitals roster was not incredible. They weren't expected to go out and win it all, and they did, led by Barry Trotz, and great on him. I think his only real star player was Alex Overton, and the whole rest of that team became better with Barry Trotz there. He ran a very, very good organization when he was with that, a very good team when he was with them, and that's great. So he's shown that he can improve good teams and make them great teams. I'd say on paper, the Vegas Golden Knights team is already great on paper. List of if you're looking at names and capabilities of them, I think they already have a great team. How much better can he make a great team already? Now they didn't make playoffs, so it's hard to say great team. But if you look at paper, fully healthy, the Vegas Golden Knights have a great roster. Maybe that doesn't translate to a great team, but they have a great roster. So he can improve that and make them a great team from his great roster if they're only a good team right now. So that's something good for the Vegas Golden Knights. A long-time coach in the league, I repeated that a million times. New face of the team. Vegas Golden Knights have already moved on from a coach once in their 5 years in the league. I don't think they're worried about doing it again. I think they're willing to take that risk. I mean, they're in Sin City. They're in Las Vegas. They're willing to take risks. So I could very well see them do that, and you bring in a new face that's going to reinvigorate these guys, these young guys, these older guys. He's going to reinvigorate them. Mark Stone, I think as the captain, you see a new face. He's going to really bond with Barry Trotz really early on, and that's going to bring a new will to this team. Now, my only worry is there was reports that Barry Trotz doesn't like Logan Thompson. I like Logan Thompson. He's my favorite goalie right now for this team. I would be very upset if he was no longer on this team. I don't know how much of that is true. That's really my only worry about bringing Barry Trotz in. But new face to the team, that brings everyone else, and I'd assume there'd be new coaches and new other things like that. So hopefully there's a better, physical program, lifting program, conditioning program, something like that to limit the amount of injuries because there was a lot of them this year. And then a young team, I don't know how to say it, not a young team. The team's not young. A young franchise in the Vegas Golden Knights who are entering their 6th year in the league, add one of the longest tenured coaches. And I think that's very, very important to take somebody that has proven that they can do a lot of things and put a young group of guys, a team that has not been together long, under their wing. And I think that can improve Vegas a lot. But that's it. Pete Deboer versus Barry Trotz. Comment down below who you prefer, or if you have someone else that you prefer more, go ahead and do that too. Personally, I want Barry Trotz. I never really was a huge fan of Pete Deboer ever, even when they first changed. But does Barry Trotz improve this team a lot? I'm not exactly sure. We won't know. So if you enjoyed this video, give me a like, or if you didn't, give me a dislike. That's completely fine with me. It helps me know, helps me find new ways to improve. So give me some criticism so I can improve for you guys. Also, likes help the algorithm a lot. So do comments. If you enjoy this content and you want more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. I have videos daily at this point, unless something crazy happens. Like yesterday, I was in a tornado warning and it was raining so bad that it sounded like there's a fan right next to the mic, so I didn't post yesterday. But if you like this content, daily content, NBA, NHL, and NFL, go ahead and subscribe because I really appreciate it. Every single one of you is noticed. Also, comment if you want Pete Deboer, Barry Trotz, or someone else more. So, as always, you know how it goes if you've been here long enough. I hope I taught you something. I hope it made you smile. I hope it made you laugh. And something that's really important to me affects someone else's life in a great way. And as always, you guys all be safe out there.
But something deep inside won't let me quit. I swear that